Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here at our third webinar on our 50-state strategy. We're excited you're here, and we're excited to dive into some more details on scaling dam removal to address the needs of a changing world, specifically at the state level. Real quick housekeeping. You all are muted, but you still have access to the chat and Q&A functions. Throughout the webinar, please take a moment to go into the chat. You should be able to enter your name, your organization, and your location so that we can see who is here. We've got about 100 attendees so far and counting, so we would love to know who is here, and that way y'all can see each other. You also have the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. If you're not familiar with it, please take a moment, use your mouse to navigate on down. We will be monitoring the Q&A throughout this webinar. Brian Graber and I will be in the background as Serena is talking, answering some questions, and then we'll save the really hard ones for Serena at the end. So please go ahead and make sure you're asking questions as we go through, and we will answer it throughout this webinar. So welcome to the webinar. This is our third in a series of dam removal webinars that we have been putting out from American Rivers. We started in January. We had our second actually last week. This is our third on the 50-state strategy, and we'll do our fourth next month. Serena, actually, can you go to the next slide? It's taking a minute to change. Okay, thanks so much. So this is what I was just talking about, our 4 webinars in our dam removal series. These are targeted for our dam removal community of practice. Many of you have been with us throughout these series, so we're excited. If you're new to this, welcome. Our 50-state strategy, our orange bubble, is where we're at today. Serena McLean is going to be walking us through the 50-state strategy for expanding dam removal practice. Next month, I will be diving into our federal policy agenda for dam removal. All of this information is available on our AmericanRivers.org website, specifically on our Community of Practice webpage. Again, my name is Katie Schmidt, and I have the privilege of working with our National Community of Practice of dam removal practitioners. So we have over 800 members of our Community of Practice and counting. And we are trying our best to provide tools and resources for the work that you do across the country in expanding dam removal practice. These webinar series is one of the tools that we are providing. You'll have a moment at the end of this where you'll be prompted to fill out a survey, and I ask that you take a moment to fill that survey out, answer questions, and let us know how we can help you in your practice. Webinars are great, but what else do you need at the state level, at the national level? How can we provide the tools that you need to work on dam removals in your realm, wherever that may be? Serena, can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. A quick background for those of you who are new to American Rivers. We are a national river conservation organization. We are dedicated to protecting and restoring rivers across the nation, and we do a lot of this through dam removal. We've been working in the dam removal field for 25 years, and we have seen it grow exponentially. So we're here to support, we're here to expand that work, and I am so excited to introduce Serena McLean to you, who will be walking us through the 50-state strategy on removing dams and how that's going to help us reach our goal of removing 30,000 dams by the year 2050. All right, I'm going to go on mute now. Serena, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Katie. Thanks, everyone, for joining us here today. Again, I work for American Rivers. I've been with the organization. It will be 23 years this June. And over that time, I've seen the American Rivers really grow and expand. We've managed or provided in-depth technical assistance to 326 dam removals all across the country, and have led dam removal trainings in 23 states, supporting more than 700 subsequent removals. If you attended our January webinar or have spoken with many of our fantastic staff, you may have heard that we set an ambitious goal for ourselves. And quite frankly, all of you as well. And that is, as Katie mentioned, to remove 30,000 dams and open 300,000 miles of river by 2050. I'd be lying if I didn't share that even I questioned our audacity in the beginning. But we'll never create real lasting change if we only reach for what's within our grasp and we only dream of what we already know. So over the next 25 minutes, we're going to discuss how over time we'll increase the pace of dam removal by a factor of 1,000 dams per year. And we'll start with a brief overview, just really quickly, of the state of dams and dam removal in the US. We'll talk about what a 50-state strategy is, and then through examples and case studies, talk about how these strategies, when woven together, really are and can be a recipe for sustainable growth. The good news is that we're not starting from scratch. There have been a lot of successes. 1,668 dams have been removed since the removal of Edwards Dam on the Kennebec River in 1998. In fact, when you look at the rate of annual growth over time, it's been roughly 10.5% per year, resulting in 2,119 dams removed since 1912. We've been deliberate in driving this growth using social change theories to make dam removal a more normal, common practice. But it's not, we talk a lot about numbers, right? 2,119 dams removed. We have a goal of removing 30,000 dams, but it's really just a placeholder, right? Because it's not just about dams removed. What these are stories. These are fragmented rivers that have been reconnected. On average, dam removals open up about 10 miles per project. For example, in dams removed since 1998, 36% of those dams reconnected more than 20 miles of habitat. Looking at that average of 10 miles per project, you figure about 21,000 miles of river opened up. The other thing we know, though, is it's not enough. We often talk about dams as if they're an endangered species, a precious commodity to be preserved, when the reality is that dams are so pervasive that most of these are an invisible presence in our daily lives. When I was little, and I swear to you, it's a true story, I would go for walks with my mom and my grandmother on top of a dam. And we would spend Saturdays watching my brother play soccer on soccer fields that were literally downstream of a really massive earthen dam. I didn't really know it at the time. It was just a thing. And it wasn't until I was older that I really knew the true impacts of what that structure had. And so whereas dams were largely seen as symbols of innovation and progress, we must now recognize their equal role in fragmenting river habitat and even communities. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the National Inventory of Dams and the fact that it logs or inventories 91,843 dams. We also know it vastly, vastly underestimates the number of structures and stream barriers out there. The Southeast Aquatic Resources Partnership and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are currently in the process of developing a national inventory and a national prioritization tool. It currently stands at approximately 531,000 dams, and they're not done. They're still collecting information and working with partners and all of you around the country to continue to pull in your data sources and build that inventory. We also know that the number of high or significant hazard dams continues to increase. Even looking at national inventory dams alone, we know there are nearly 6,000 high or significant hazard dams that are in poor or unsatisfactory condition. So how do we increase the growth in project numbers to get us to 30,000 dams by 2050? American Rivers has developed a three-pronged roadmap to get us there. As Katie mentioned, we have a federal policy agenda where we look at federal strategies that will help us increase the pace of dam removal. There are the state level strategies, which is the 50-state strategy webinar you're currently in. And then it's work through and projects through our community of practice, which all of you are a part of. Katie, why don't we do a poll now?
Sounds good. All right, let me open it up. So you should have a poll that has popped up on your screen that's labeled question 1. What is the one thing you'd like to see change so that we can reconnect and restore rivers at a faster pace? We'll give folks a little over a minute to respond. I realize that's a big question to fill out in a minute, but give us what comes to top of mind for you and the work that you do. For folks who are on their phone, I think you should be able to access that, but just in case for some reason you're having issues and you want to answer in the chat or answer through Q&A, you can just say this is a response to question number 1. Again, that question is, what is the one thing you'd like to see change so that we can reconnect and restore rivers at a faster pace? And for folks who are watching this as a recording, feel free to reach out to us and let us know what your one thing is. We'll give about 30 more seconds on this one. Okay, I'm not going to actually close this out. I'll let people type for a few more minutes, but Serena, you can go ahead and get going again. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Katie. And thanks to all of you for taking the time to think about the question and answer it. I hope one thing that will become clear both through this presentation and others, and we talk about it, like we love data and information, and it's through looking at what's gone before us that we're able to figure out what makes the most sense in terms of paths forward. Well, let's talk about the 50-state strategy. So beyond projects, what the 50-state strategy does is answer the question, what enabling conditions would allow us to reconnect and restore freshwater systems at a significantly faster pace? We know that in the United States, where real change occurs at the state level, there's a lot that can be done. And so what this is a national campaign to advance dam removal in all 50 states by developing a playbook for states on the most important set of policies, programs, and funding recommendations that have been proven to increase the number of dams being removed and the number of river mouths being restored. These recommendations are based on 25 years of dam removal expertise in states across the country, and pull from examples in states that have done it well, including examples and enabling mechanisms from states that have really been at the forefront of creating what we hope are transferable models. If you are on our Roadmap to 30,000 webinar, Brian spoke with you about 6 of the factors to think about when looking to increase capacity. And what the 50-state strategy does is it takes these factors and turns them into a compendium of recommendations, sample policy language, and case studies that all of you can use to create your own state work plans and agenda. The next 2 slides are going to have a lot of words. I ask you, not to be overwhelmed. We're going to share out, there is an actual document and report that will be shared. We certainly can share the PowerPoint slides, so don't feel the need to write down everything. But I am going to talk through, some of this information in more detail. Specifically, our state level priorities are roughly focused on 4 main categories: incentivizing dam owners, building capacity, building the movement, and building a funding base. So for example, if you look at the strategies around building capacity, we all know that one of the limiting factors, not even just in dam removal, but in river restoration at large, is the need to develop a workforce of trained project managers. We don't have enough people who are willing to take on these projects and shepherd them from initiation to implementation. And that cuts across many, many different categories, right? It's the qualified consultants to design and permit projects. It's the regulators who are already overwhelmed and have too many projects on their list. It's the need to actually develop strategies to address the already list of priority projects we have so that we can turn them into actual feasible projects. So these are kind of the rough categories that the overall framework addresses. This is a lot of information. And given the limited time we have, I'm only going to be able to focus on a few of the priorities listed in the 50-state strategy. We're going to focus on numbers 1, 2, 4, 7, and 10. What this is a list of the top line recommendations that you'll find in the 50-state strategy, along with ranked in order of their expected impact we think they'll have on moving the needle in terms of scaling dam removal. So let's talk about a few of these. So one of the top tools in our toolbox are strong state dam safety programs. Of the dams that have been removed, 44% were removed for reasons associated with safety, liability, and economics. And while it was tempting to associate a larger impact to this strategy, say if we only focused as a group, as a community, right, on dam safety, would we be able to remove then 25,000 of the 30,000 dams if we could just shift that, right? You know, the fact of the matter is it's often strong dam safety programs are even more effective when coupled with other priorities on this list. For example, when I looked at the data and the states with high marks in dam safety, meaning that they had strong, reasonably well-funded dam safety programs with adequate enforcement mechanisms, and looked at the corresponding high number of removals, all of those states tended to have multiple of these strategies or enabling conditions present. We are going to dive deeper into dam safety in a few minutes. I want to keep going through some of this list before we do though. Number two, ensure state agencies have staff and or programs dedicated to removing dams. The crux of this strategy is institutionalizing dam removal as a restoration practice at the state agency level in a way that transcends attrition and politics. What often starts with individual leadership, and I know, you know, there are likely many of you on this call who are, who are really leading this work in your state agencies. And what starts with a person or a small group of people, you know, we really see a shift in effectiveness when it turns into an institutionalized program. One example of this is the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services group. You know, originally when I started, Deb Loisel running and overseeing a lot of their dam removal work. But as they've had attrition and people moved on over the past 24 years, you know, that program has still continued to thrive under new leaders because it's institutionalized at the state level. And they've been able to not only, you know, continue to run and coordinate a river restoration task force, they've developed guidance for practitioners of dam removal projects, they've provided resources. Again, like it's the power of a program versus the power of a single person. I want to talk a little bit about number 4, establishing effective state dam removal communities of practice or aquatic connectivity teams. Partnership and collaboration are the key to success. And we've seen that the track record of growth in states with communities of practice and or teams is, you know, it's far more significant, it's appreciable than states without those teams. One of my favorite examples of this is Vermont. Vermont Dams Task Force started in roughly 2008, and they did a lot of, you know, program building workshops and trainings with American Rivers and others. And, you know, what we've seen over time through the leadership of VNRC and the Nature Conservancy and other host of wonderful, fantastic partners is that, you know, the Vermont Dams Task Force, the state of Vermont has been able to increase the rate of dam removal in the state by over 400%. In fact, Vermont actually leads the nation and the number of dam removals per capita. I think of it as a very small but mighty state. I wanted to talk a little bit about number 7, which is reinforcing and establishing state fish passage laws with meaningful enforcement mechanisms. State fish passage laws have been a powerful incentive in many early dam removals. And, you know, one of the reasons why it's lower on the list and you know, we don't contend that it could have a more significant impact is that what we've seen is that in order for state fish passage laws to be truly effective is they are most effective when they're coupled with strong state agency leadership and or a robust movement, right? A community of practice, a group of partners willing to litigate. And frankly, that's because many, just thinking of the East Coast itself, and I know this is true throughout the West too, there are state fish passage laws on the books, but there's often very little incentive or appetite for enforcing said laws if there are, strong enforcement mechanisms. And if you look at the history of state fish passage laws, most of those were truly formed and gained their teeth through adjudications and groups suing to get those laws enforced. So while it is a powerful tool, and I think it's one that as a community, one we should be looking at, it really does have to be coupled with strong state leadership and a willing to take that on. Finally, before we move on, I want to talk about number 10, which is leveraging hydropower relicensing, disposition studies, and other integrated water management processes to secure the removal of large, complex, larger scale dam removals. And I want to talk about this specifically because I don't want its place on this list, and this list is certainly subject to change, but I don't want you to confuse yourself that its place on the list means it's not important. This is an incredibly important, powerful tool for us focusing on dam removal. I mean, it's with these larger, more complex campaigns, right? These are your Klamath dam removals, your LY dam removal, your Condit dam removal, the Penobscot, Kellogg dam removal. These are projects that will deliver big conservation wins, right? This is the work that we have to do. Are we going to do 1,000, 10,000 of those over the next 25 years? Highly unlikely, because they are complex and they do take much longer than your average dam. But these are incredibly important projects. And in addition to delivering big conservation wins, these do have the ability to drive momentum, help in amplifying the message, turning attention to the fact that really hard stakeholder processes and seemingly complicated projects can be accomplished, and we can achieve some really great things with that. So I want to make sure that we've developed a preliminary order of impact in terms of looking at where areas of focus should be, but that one is incredibly important. Finally, I want to leave you with this slide, just a thought that, again, there is a lot of correlation among what makes for states that aggressively remove dams and restore their rivers. When looking at the data in our tracking database, like the states that have developed one or two of these, or who are strong in one or two of these, are completing 2 to 4 projects per year. States like Pennsylvania, who during various parts of time has overcome quite a few of those, right? They had state funding sources. They had enforced fish passage laws. They had a dam safety program that not only coordinated with the state fisheries folks, but we're leading a pretty clear-cut regulatory process. There's just a few very vague examples. But again, states like Pennsylvania, who've done more of these, have had several years in a row and periods of time where they were removing 25 to 30 projects per year. So again, this list is important in looking at each of these individually. It's even more important if we talk about how we can collectively work as a community to try to implement more of these in individual states. I'm going to take a little bit of time to dive more deeply into state dam safety programs. I mentioned that dam safety provides one of our most important incentives for dam removal. It's a fact that this country's dam fleet is aging. The average age of dams in the NID is over 57 years old. We're also seeing, because of climate change and more extreme fluctuations in weather patterns, more dam failures. There have been 1,243 dam failures or emergency interventions, 80% of those which have been in the past 20 years. Dams also are a potential drowning hazard. More than 1,400 people have died in the hydraulics by low-head dams. And we know that of the, close to 600,000 dams that are out there, there are 30,000 out there that are obsolete or uneconomical and are becoming unsafe. What we don't have are 30,000 dam owners that are ready to remove their dams. But I want to talk a little bit about specifically what the recommendations are for a strong state dam safety program, and not to step on our federal policy agenda talk, but I do want to put a little bit of teaser in here. Dam safety is important enough that American Rivers, that you'll find dam safety in both of American River strategies. We are working at dam safety on the federal level, as well as working on improving dam safety at the state level. Because the fact of the matter is, states across the nation are underfunded and understaffed. You know, there's a lot put on the shoulders of very few people with very little money trying to keep people and rivers safe in managing dam infrastructure. At the state level, to truly be successful, though, we must strengthen these programs in all 50 states, which includes strengthening the evaluation and enforcement of the safety of dams. We have to improve these efforts by making it the responsibility of the dam owners to inspect and maintain their structures, requiring more frequent, detailed inspections of deficient dams, and increasing the penalties for unsafe dams and violations. I don't know how many states I've seen where, you know, the penalty for an unsafe dam is somewhere along the lines of $100 or $1,000. 3, requiring dam owners to ensure that funds are available to repair or remove dams in the event they can't or won't meet dam safety standards. They also have to increase public safety and environmental safeguards, though, by expanding the hazard classification system to factor in drowning potential and environmental damage. This means increasing jurisdiction in many states to include low-head dams and structures that may or may not be perceived as dams. Additional standards should include 1, improving the downstream hazard classification practices to ensure the safety of people downstream, ensuring that the models and tools associated for assessing the dam adequacy account for current climate change data. 3, expand dam inventories to better account for low-head dam structures. 4, ensure modeling prioritizes protecting socially vulnerable communities. And then lastly, incorporating environmental impacts into the hazard classification system. Another place where I wanted to give a few examples is securing sustainable and dedicated state funding. Creating or increasing state sources provide funding to remove dams and reconnect fragmented river mouths. State-led funding is an important source for dam removal projects, and state agencies can provide critical technical assistance to the project proponents. In addition, match requirements for federal grants to remove dams may be outside the capacity of dam owners who own uneconomical dams. And state-led funding can fulfill these requirements and make federal grants accessible for bigger, more expensive projects. The thing that excites me about this one is the fact that these funding programs vary in form and function and can be tailored to the mission of the agency to which the funds are appropriated. The multi-benefit nature of dam removal projects creates opportunities to fund dam removal through a wide array of mechanisms, right? It doesn't have to just be through funding for fish passage or through a fisheries agency. And I wanted to share a couple of examples with you. We're going to look very briefly at Ohio and Wisconsin. Wisconsin has removed 161 dams over time, and they're actually, in numbers, second in the nation. And Ohio has removed 107 dams, making it the 4th state to remove the most dams. Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources has 2 grant programs that I want to mention. One is the Municipal Dam Grant Program and a Dam Removal Grant Program. And this funding is through Wisconsin's Dam Safety Office, and it's to address abandoned dams or those that have surpassed their useful life. The Municipal Dam Grant Program provides funding for municipal dam owners up to $1 million for dam removal. And the Dam Removal Grant Program is available to both publicly owned and privately owned dams and provides up to $50,000. Ohio, for those of you who know me on this call, I have a special fascination with Ohio and what they've done. Ohio and the Ohio EPA leveraged the Clean Water Act and the Clean Water Act State Revolving Fund to restore rivers in ways that I haven't seen quite in many other places. So Ohio has what's called the Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program, and this was created in the Ohio EPA in 2000. And so the Water Resource Restoration Sponsor Program uses interest monies from the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund. I'm not even going to go into the acronyms, lots of acronyms, word salad, alphabet soup, whatever it's called. But they use this interest money to sponsor projects to fund preservation and restoration of the state's water resources. And so since its inception, there's a lot more detail about how it works. And there's a lot more to it than what I'm just sharing here. But know that by the state taking advantage and creating a program to leverage Clean Water Act funds, since its inception, they've awarded more than $195 million to restore and protect streams in Ohio, including 14 dams that were removed using that fund. That's pretty fantastic if you ask me. So let's bring it all together. Let's tie in and think about what it looks like if you're in a state that has multiple factors going for it, many of these enabling conditions. So I want to share my perspective on how dam removal has evolved in Massachusetts over the last 20 years. And I hope that my Massachusetts colleagues will forgive me for any liberties I may inadvertently take in glossing over certain details. But really the story, and you see a brief timeline on one side of the screen and the trajectory mapping kind of like the growth of dam removal in Massachusetts over time. So 2004 is where the state, through the River Ways program, got the idea to put together a priorities project program for dam removal. And this was modeled after the state's priority projects program for wetlands. This early iteration was really small. It was a couple of staff. It was, I think in the early days, in the early 2000s, there was a real sense that it may or may not succeed. But they picked up traction, right? They were able to slowly start pulling together lists of projects, and you'll see between 2004 and 2006 and 2008, you really start to see the line on the graph begin to grow. Such that by 2005, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, working with many people, issued dam removal regulatory guidance. They were seeing more dam removals come across their desks and needed to come up with a set of guidelines to help both applicants and the agency itself evaluate these projects in a permitting setting. In the same year, the town of Taunton, Massachusetts was evacuated due to the threat of the Whittington Dam breach, which again, important in terms of thinking about a triggering action that, shifted thinking or, led to other actions. 2007, Massachusetts dam safety laws were updated to include owner responsible inspections. By 2009, we'd really seen a growth in the program within the state of Massachusetts, and what was the, Riverways transitioned into the Division of Ecological Restoration, which was established. I'm tracking the growth of this state program because it's been really instrumental in pushing development of dam removal projects in Massachusetts. Programs like this have been able to not only prioritize projects, right, but provide technical assistance to partners on the ground working on it. They've been able to serve as project managers and take on projects to some extent. They can provide a regulatory guidance and assistance, and even, help connect and corral funding back to the state. So we really see a growth of the slow growth of this particular program to the point of where DER is established in 2009. In 2010, there's another pivotal dam failure. The Forge Pond Dam breached, prompting in 2011 an audit conducted of the Massachusetts Dam Safety Program. One of the outcomes of that was that 100 dams were prioritized for repair or removal, critical municipal dams. By 2012, another thing that you see coming out of this is the legislature enacts the Dam and Seawall Repair or Removal Fund. And the last thing on the timeline, just an important thing to mark in Massachusetts growth is in 2018, a Massachusetts environmental bond bill passes providing for repair or removal of dams. And note, this isn't the first environmental bond bill in Massachusetts. This is one of the more recent ones in a series of environmental bonds since the early 2000s. But, through 2021, funding from these programs has provided over $8 million for dam removal projects. And again, I highlight Massachusetts as an example, and they aren't alone. There are other states that have this as well. But in looking at this example, you really see, the power of developing a state program, of really strengthening and looking for ways to strengthen your state dam safety laws, looking to streamline and or clarify regulatory guidance for dam removal. You see the increase of some funding for dam removal projects. So that, again, you're looking at, at least 4 or 5 of the factors that enable success. We took the chart of dam removals that I showed previously and projected it for exponential growth. And I do want to point out that what looks to be a straight line here, if you were to really zoom in on the detail, growth isn't always linear, right? And I think if we were to project growth over the next 25 years, you'd see a lot of like ups and downs. But what we did do is note that to reach 30,000 dam removals, we have to have a 15% annual growth rate in projects through 2050. Note that that's an increase from the 10.5% annual growth we've been driving for the last 25 years. But that 15% growth needs to occur in all aspects of project development, right? Like we can't just have an 15% increase in the number of dam removal projects being implemented. That won't be possible unless we see an equal increase in funding year to year. If we see increase in staffing, both with NGO capacity, state agency capacity, municipal capacity, and we see that same percentage of growth in states that are developing programs for this. Looking at the data, it looks like the inflection point is about 10 years from now. And according to social change theory, that's the point we need to drive toward before growth becomes more sustainable. So that, again, these structures and the awareness and the momentum that we're striving for are in place, that it can sustain growth with less effort in changing the systems and the processes. So that means that these next 10 years are the most critical for trying to implement some of the changes and strategies that are recommended. For example, if each project manager manages 5 of the 30,000 dam removals over the next 30 years, and if we look at the United States as a whole, we need roughly 120 project managers per state. We need to expand the capacity of nonprofits and tribal nations and state agencies. And we need to make it easier for dam owners and consultants to manage projects on their own. One of the things we've done here at American Rivers is think about, if the next 10 years is critical, what do we need to get to? What do we need to do in the next 5 years in terms of targets? We need to remove another 627 dams, more than doubling the current pace of 80 dam removals per year to 168 by 2028. At American Rivers, we're committed to doubling our staff that work on dam removal, transitioning from what is now 13.5 full-time employees working on dam removal to hopefully 27 by the end of 2028. We need to develop more effective dam removal programs in 10 states. We need to inspire and train 200 new long-term project managers. That's both internally within American Rivers, but also externally within the broader community of practice. And we need to generate the next $1.7 billion in sustainable funding. That is a lot, but it is achievable. We've done similar things in the past, just not at this scale. And so my challenge for all of you is to join us in committing to scaling in this way as well. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's next. You know, I've shared pieces of the strategy. I've shared some of the thinking. We are still developing a finalizing strategy. That's one of the reasons why you just got a snapshot. In spring of 2024, May precisely is the goal. We'll be in a process of getting feedback from the American Rivers National Dam Removal Advisory Team. This is a new team, a small group of external partners that are from a cross-section of backgrounds and areas of expertise, some that aren't even in dam removal, that, you know, will provide us feedback and guidance and really help us gut check some of these strategies. We are looking to release the actual 50-state strategy national framework, which is the report I discussed that has specific policy language and case studies and the full suite of recommendations in the summer of 2024. And beginning in fall 2024 on into the future, we'll start to co-create state-level strategies and select pilot states with state and regional partners. So that's what's on the horizon. I appreciate all of you joining here today. I anticipate that you will be hearing from us quite a bit in the future. And we hope you're enthusiastic about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Serena. We actually have some time for Q&A with Serena, but before we do dive in, we actually have another poll that we would love to hear from you all on. And that is, we want to hear right now, as things are, what is your state doing well? So I'm going to launch this. This is question number 2. What is something that your state is doing well? If you have something that you want to add of, this is what we'd like to be doing well, you can add that as well and clarify that. But please tell us, what is something that your state is doing well? And I'm going to leave that poll open and off to the side. And then we are going to open this up for a Q&A with Serena. So Serena, you ready for Q&A?
Sure thing. Do you want me to keep sharing my screen?
No, I think you're okay. It's up to you, but I think you're good. Y'all are going to see Brian Graber's face with us here today. He is another part of our national dam removal team, so he will be also answering questions in the background. So Serena, from your slide, let's see here, slide 11, if you've got it up on your screen, the dam removal state priorities, we have Nick Anderson wants to know what method was used to calculate the estimated contribution. So those percentages, if y'all remember our top 10 priorities that Serena shared with us, and then there were the percentages calculated. How did we come up with those percentage points?
I'm going to give you my honest answer. Because that's the kind of person I am. But no, I looked at the data that we have. American Rivers does keep a database of dams removed, and it does have, you know, it's if you go to the website, you'll be able to find it is publicly shared via Figshare. We have additional data that we don't share via Figshare just because of the QA/QC process that we keep here. But I looked at the data and really looked at why dams were removed. What I saw there, I looked at the anecdotal evidence that we've had by working with states all around the country over the last 24 years, and then did back of the napkin estimates. Again, when I thought 44, that was kind of my comment about like why I didn't assign a higher number to the state dam safety laws. You know, I was very tempted to, but it really was a back of the napkin analysis. And I guess the truly honest part is me calling Brian as I was crunching the figures, wanting to get way too into the weeds to really do the kind of statistical analysis that really looked at the correlation between all of these things and how they affected each other. But we'll leave it at that.
Excellent. Thank you, Serena. Okay, we've got another question regarding one of the later comments that you had is, how will the pilot states be selected for implementing these strategies? We're selecting based on places where American Rivers already has staff on the ground
working on these strategies in places where we already have active communities of practice and aquatic connectivity teams that are already working together in such a way that they're strategizing. They've done projects together, right? They've developed guides on how to remove dams. They've like strategized and collaborated on dam safety policy. So teams that are used to working together and that are already ready. There are a couple of places where I've had conversations with really motivated partners and state agency staff that are interested in being part of this pilot program. But I will say that the early implementation, particularly when we're actually looking at developing state strategies for implementing some of these, is probably going to be largely focused on the East Coast, the Northeast, and the South, Mid-Atlantic and Southeast specifically. We are having conversations in other parts of the country, but there's more work to be done to get folks ready to even have these kinds of conversations. But if you want to be part of the pilot state and you want to take this on, this is not to discourage you. Reach out. We will help you get started.
And if you need Serena's email, y'all have mine, and I'm happy to pass along hers. Thanks for that, Serena. We have another question about dam safety. So how do we turn state dam safety officials from working to make unsafe dams safe to being willing to entertain and promote removal as a solution for dams?
No, that's a really great question. And I know some of the states do struggle. Brian, do you want to answer that? I've got a response if you don't. But
yeah, sure. No, I'm happy to take that on. So we've been working really hard to build a partnership with the Association of State Dam Safety Officials. We've been working with them on policy issues. We've just recently worked together with them to try to reauthorize the National Dam Safety Program, which is a FEMA program that distributes funds to the state dam safety offices. And we've been giving presentations at their annual conference. And in their, they have technical webinars that they do as well. So through that partnership, we're identifying how we can help to incentivize dam removals and provide information for dam safety offices to be able to distribute to their dam owners. But really, I think what it is that we're doing is just sort of normalizing the concept of removing dams, and we've seen some really good strides through those presentations. We've heard from heads of dam safety programs who have said to us that they previously thought this is a radical thing to do, and now after listening to us and realizing what other states are doing, that it just seems more normal. So, ways to go in some states. We've gotten a long way in other states. States like New Hampshire have really led the dam safety programs, working on dam removal projects. So trying to just do that advocacy piece by piece.
I think I would add to that, really encouraging peer-to-peer discussion and collaboration, like connecting state dam safety officers with their counterparts in other states. And you get some of that at the dam safety conference and things like that, but being really intentional about connecting them with states, particularly even ones that are nearby or adjacent, that are doing good work. As well as, one of the things we're beginning to do is collect testimonies from dam owners that, could potentially care less about the ecological benefits of dam removal. But at the end of the day, it is, it's an economic decision. It's a liability decision. It's a safety decision. And so having those dam owners sharing those testimonials with state dam safety staff to see that it's not just, NGOs like American Rivers driving this, but it really is being, is and should be driven by their constituents as well as just a management decision.
Thank you both for that. Another thing that we have been doing is training, and we're training project managers, and something that we're hoping to expand this to is to do project management training with state dam safety officials. So that's another thing. I think you maybe mentioned that, Serena, but just in case you didn't, I'm just flagging that we're hoping to expand into that realm so that there's not only that relationship, but that real comprehension, understanding of what all goes into a dam removal. Because there's a lot of engineering that goes into unengineering a dam. And that sometimes can get lost in translation. And I wanted to flag here, Jessica, one of our partners, flagged that we do training and that maybe not everyone's aware of that. We do project manager training. We work with partners to offer this training in several states. I think, how many states are we at? Almost 20 now that we've done trainings in? Serena, you're the master of the spreadsheet.
Yeah, that I don't remember off the top of my head.
But
It's more than that, I
yeah.
think.
okay, so 20 plus, and if this is something that your organization is interested in hosting even in one of the states, please reach out to us, because this project manager training, we have seen a significant increase in dam removals in states and regions where we have done these trainings. And by we, I mean Brian and Serena are the main trainers. They have 2 on their books in the next month. So if you guys want to speak to a little bit more of what goes into that and how that's helping with this 50-state strategy, go for it.
Well, I do want to share that, you know, we definitely, you know, are expanding our training offerings and do trainings around the country. There's some really interesting things happening, and really, you know, a lot of people on our staff as well as partners thinking of really interesting ways to kind of dive in and contribute. I want to shout out the Nature Conservancy in New Jersey, which leads the State Dam Removal Partnership. We are, you know, some of our trainings in the Delaware River watershed over the last 2 years, we've been doing in partnership with them. And one of the things they've created in that particular watershed is not only bringing us in to do project manager trainings, right? But they've created a cohort to help support and coach new project managers along the way as they begin to take on these projects. And I think as we think about scaling and trying to cultivate 120 project managers per state, I think that's a great model for us to look to, right? How can we not only do one-off trainings, but, you know, and that's through our resource center and stuff like that. We really hope to cultivate like a real learning community where people feel like they can continue to come in and get advice, so that eventually they're able to. Thank you, Jeff, by the way, for adding all the appropriate links to the chat. But anyway, just something to keep in mind as you think about requesting project manager training and things like that. Think about like what capacity do you have potentially to help continue to coach these folks into the for the next year or two anyway.
Serena, we have one final question if since we have time. And that's on the difference between different types of dams that are removed. Since we've got this audience, I would love for you to take a stab at this. Talking about dams in Iowa, there were 2 main periods of dam building, mill dams, and then the second round was a lot of recreation dams, and parks have been built up around that. And so what are your thoughts on removing dams that their primary purpose is recreation, and that community has built up that idea and that mindset and relationship with the river as a impoundment area to recreate on?
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Katie. And I kind of glossed over. I usually do a spill 1 in terms of when I say dam, like I'm actually talking about a whole wide range of, you know, in-stream barriers that, you know, state dam safety offices might not actually include in their jurisdiction. And also I glossed over the statistic that if you look at the data, you know, we talk a lot about dam safety, but there are dams, 13% of all dams that have been removed, their primary and secondary use was either water supply or irrigation. 4% of dams that have been removed used to be hydropower dams. I don't think that recreational dams are off the table. You know, I think if you look at the National Inventory of Dams, in particular, that resource, when they code purposes for dams, you'll see it looks like, if you just look at their data, it looks like dam building is the current, sorry, I'm struggling with words. It looks that the primary use for many dams in the country would be recreation. When we think about it from the NID perspective, though, part of that is because recreation is just listed as default purpose if they're unable to identify any other purpose. But if you're working specifically in a community where you know there's recreation around the river and there are parks and things built up around it, I think, you know, we just have to take those on a case-by-case basis. I am a person who likes to challenge. I don't think is it an automatic deal breaker, but I think you really have to go through a really thoughtful community engagement process and really, you know, think about the reasons why those structures should be removed, really work with the community to determine what their needs are, like what their why is, what do they want out of the community and out of like the river, and go through it that way. Certainly, you know, it has the potential to be a much longer, much more belabored process, but you know, depending on the resource and the need, it's certainly one that can be worth the effort.
That's great. Thanks so much, Serena. There are a few questions that, let's see here, that we're going to answer privately, and we will send those out. But in the interest of time, I wanted to make sure that we have time to wrap up, and thank you all so much for being here. Serena, thank you for that wonderful presentation and walking us through the 50-state strategy. It's really important information. Partners who are here, we really appreciate you being here and being part of this movement to work to restore rivers as quickly and efficiently as possible. If there are projects that you would like to share with us that you haven't already, please do so. You'll have my email, and I'm happy to share Serena's in case you didn't catch it on the slides. Please take a moment to fill out the survey as you are exiting. It will automatically pop up. We'd love to hear back from you, especially areas that we can work to help you in the work that you do. And if you are interested in federal policy, you can join us next month for our Federal Policy Agenda webinar. So thank you again, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.